Trump's promise to release these Epstein files has become more of a thorn, I think, than what most people really assumed would happen. And a lot of that is because of this Epstein Files Transparency Act being passed.
Welcome to Deep Dive. This week we're examining the latest developments in the Jeffrey Epstein case with the recent release of over 3.5 million pages of documents by the Department of Justice. Joining me is Kaelan, Deese, Justice Department reporter for the Washington Examiner, who's been covering this story extensively. Well, Kaelan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Natasha.
So let's start with the big picture. The DOJ's release on Friday included over 3.5 million pages, 2,000 videos, and 180,000 images from Epstein's investigations spanning decades. So what stood out to you most as a reporter sifting through this massive trove?
Yeah, thanks for setting that up, Natasha. What really kind of stood out to me wasn't necessarily a specific piece of content or material here. I mean, there's no really what we would call bombshell allegations, but what this release did is it materially expanded the documentary record of how Jeffrey Epstein, interacted with these powerful people in his orbit. And it also includes these thousands of pages of emails and correspondence and contact logs that show a sustained two-way conversations with, even like often late into Epstein's life, with political operatives, billionaires, donors, and foreign officials. And essentially, the main part of this that's really difficult is trying to put it all into context and trying to verify what is sort of tongue-in-cheek communications, sometimes even code words that are used. We see often a focus between some of these interactions that Epstein's having with some of his contacts. He'll use often words like pizza. He'll use words like cookie, and even talking about like grape juice and things like that. And I say code words because these are the way that they're inserted into these conversations don't come across as the way people ordinarily sort of communicate. So, oftentimes, even, again, Jeffrey Epstein, convicted sex offender, accused pedophile, this kind of dates back to early internet lingo too, where oftentimes the word pizza was associated with things like child pornography, and things like that. So I think that definitely adds a sort of lens of disturbing elements here, but that these were just sort of conversations that were happening almost in broad daylight, considering all these email records were obtained by the Justice Department.
Yeah. And high-profile names like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Howard Lutnick, and Steve Tisch appear in emails and correspondence. And for instance, emails show Musk inquiring about the wildest party on Epstein's Island in 2012, despite his public denials of visiting. Can you walk us through what these exchanges reveal about Epstein's social network?
Yeah, the Musk reference, to start with that, appears sort of primarily focused in email correspondence and scheduling related communications. It seems like, Epstein was, attempting to leverage people, high profile people like Musk, in contacts and, the same philanthropic circles that Musk was active in. There's even, this sort of communication with Musk trying to establish a day that they could come out to the Little St. James Island where Epstein had his compound at, but ultimately plans never panned out, I guess. And Musk has come out and vehemently sort of stated that he was not actually party to any of those events that were happening. One of the other names that we could sort of tap into a little bit here is very relevant, I think, to the political landscape. That includes figures like the War Room podcast host and former Trump White House advisor Steve Bannon. In the correspondence with Steve Bannon, all those videos that we've known about for a long time that Bannon recorded with Epstein in his later years in life, all that video footage came out, and it shows sort of this camera shot of Epstein sitting and answering all these questions, oftentimes about miscellaneous subjects, talking about physics, finance, things like that. And it doesn't, again, it doesn't add to any sort of bombshell component here, but it does underscore the fact that there were so many of these high profile people, including people who have, cultivated these audiences that care about the Epstein files and want to see justice. A figure like Steve Bannon just sitting there very casually with Epstein has raised a lot of alarms and questions about why Bannon, of all people, was so comfortable. But it's not just Bannon. Like I said, there's so many people who were just okay with even following the 2008 sex offender conviction whenever Epstein was charged with soliciting prostitution with one prostitute and another girl, minor, and so that is something that I think that despite him having that documented record, people just seem to not really, these high profile figures, I should say, many of them seem to not really care too much about that aspect. It wasn't really, a barrier to them interacting with Epstein.
Yeah, very interesting indeed. And the files also mention unverified allegations against President Trump, which the DOJ has labeled as potentially fake submissions from before the 2020 election. And on a similar note, there's a 2002 email possibly from Melania Trump to Ghislaine Maxwell. How do you navigate reporting on such sensitive, potentially misleading details to protect victims' privacy while informing the public?
Yeah, it's something that, whenever you see these allegations, you have to sort of, look into the material to make sure that there's actually some veracity there, if anything. I think, kind of breaking that down, there's the elements here of some of the most salacious accusations against high-profile figures, including people like President Trump, former President Bill Clinton, uh, you know, George Bush, in all these different contexts. They're submitted to the FBI via these forms known as FBI 302s, which 302s are essentially whenever an FBI agent is accepting tips or long form testimonies from different people making allegations, but those are just the preliminary, like the accusations that the FBI is taking in and has no way to verify or make or prove it's credible until there's more digging that's done into them. And so one of the things that's interesting here is that many of these 302s that have the salacious accusations, there will be information that's provided to the side of this table, if you will, that shows that the person that was making the accusation, some of them had confirmed criminal backgrounds. So if a person who has an established criminal record is making an allegation like this, it sort of adds to the component there that there may not be there may be certain information that can't just be taken at face value because oftentimes, whenever there's that criminal element there to the person making the allegation, you have to sort of, take a step back and say, is this something that's actually, something that I can trust? And what information can I then, use to go and try to corroborate this? At this time, I mean, the fact that the DOJ says that they don't have any information to lead them to further arrests, it would sort of imply that they looked into these allegations and weren't able to actually put any merit to them. I think one of the biggest ones that really grabbed a lot of eyes and attention was this. I'll try not to get into too much detail, but it involves a 13, 14-year-old alleged victim who was giving oral sex to then not President Donald Trump. That's the allegation, and there's an accusation that there was that this girl bit him, and that has in no way been proven or substantiated in at any level. But what we are seeing is that people are taking those types of 302 forms and posting them online to a bunch of people who have no likely understanding of how these 302 forms work. So it creates this situation where there's just boundless rumors that are circulating the internet. But it takes a very cautious eye to look at these things and be able to disseminate to the public whether these are proven allegations. And so far, none of the things in the 302 forms have, uh, by any standard, the uh, met the standard of actually being verifiable. So it's a lot of stuff that you just really gotta take with a grain of salt. And unfortunately, the public doesn't seem to be doing that online.
Yeah, no kidding. And internationally, UK politician Peter Mandelson resigned from the Labour Party after revelations of alleged $75,000 payments from Epstein in 2004. So, what does this say about the global reach of Epstein's influence, and how did your reporting connect these dots to the broader U.S. investigation?
Well, so that's an interesting question. I mean, it's really what you're seeing, at least preliminarily, is this weird juxtaposition where it seems as if, obviously from the outset, the DOJ said last July that there was no information they had to lead to further arrests and accountability. And this latest release continues that pattern that we're seeing from this DOJ. But conversely, I mean, I think we're seeing that our foreign counterparts, like our cousins over in the UK, have taken some of these matters very seriously and aggressively. I mean, the British police opened that criminal investigation into Peter Mandelson, um, and following that disclosure that he had allegedly received payments from Epstein and shared some sensitive government information. And there's also that aspect to this too. It's not just the sex crimes of Epstein, but it's also these other elements here, and it's more of a story, I think, about how so many global elite were connected with this man, and how we're seeing still today the implications. I mean, Mandelson resigned from the Labour Party, stepped down from the House of Lords, and now there's a live criminal investigation. So, you know, it's a little bit interesting. I think an interesting analogy is sort of how over the last month or so there's been this allegations being made that Elon Musk's Grok is facilitating these deep fake images of people. Anyone can take an image of you or I, or and place them in scantily clad garments, and that feature was recently disabled from X, but it was sort of passed off initially in the U.S. as being much to do about nothing because it was just essentially sophisticated Photoshop. But meanwhile, the UK, even France has been taking this matter seriously, involving Elon Musk's Grok AI capabilities. So we're seeing that kind of that interesting difference that we take to matters versus our foreign counterparts, and obviously that's much more about a speech related issue, being able to create whatever you want. And obviously, we're seeing a more serious approach being taken on both fronts by our European counterparts.
And the DOJ, through Deputy AG Todd Blanche, insists that there's no super secret cache of files being withheld for national security, with redactions limited to victim privacy, ongoing probes, and explicit content. Yet both Democrats and Republicans in Congress argue more needs to be released. So from your coverage, how does the DOJ's narrative of a complete investigative clash with congressional skepticism, and what sources did you consult to explore this tension?
Yeah, so what the DOJ is saying is really getting a lot of pushback from the sponsors and the framers of the bill that led to this release in the first place, the Epstein Transparency Act. Democrats like Ro Khanna, for example, have been really vocal about how 3.5 million documents being available to the public is really only half of the identified 6 million records, in total. Uh, and so they're basically saying that there's about 3 million more documents, and there's about 200,000 documents that have been released already that have questionable redactions. And so you're getting this really almost this impossible scenario as well, because while Democrats and other, people such as Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's no longer in Congress. Those types of Republicans are frustrated with there not being that, complete release. You're also getting the DOJ under fire from victims of Jeffrey Epstein who are actually going to court this week to try and make the pitch to a judge in New York that the files need to be taken down because of some of the um, lack thereof redactions that might be actually implicating some of these witnesses. And that's something that's going to be going to a hearing. The judge is going to look at that and decide if there's anything that needs to be taken down. We've already seen the DOJ since it began this Epstein library that they call it online that you can search through. We've actually seen documents periodically being removed, which raises suspicious eyebrows at first, but consequently, they usually wind up getting placed back on, sometimes with minimal redactions because of that element here that they were given a 30-day countdown to release this, uh, and they've been divesting other resources, people who work on usually separate entities and matters, who are going and working on this redaction effort. And so basically, what we've seen from the DOJ is that their effort is not perfect. They've been put into a really tough spot, admittedly. It doesn't excuse it necessarily, but it definitely shows that they feel like they've been strained. And it seems like as the days go on, um, as parties across the board have different reasons for being unsatisfied, this really seems like an unwinnable task.
Yes.
The other element I'll just add to that here too, that's kind of confounding is that, there's this pattern that we've seen with the photos that have been released where it seems like almost ubiquitously there's no redactions of there's got to be certain redactions of certain men in the photos, but it seems like anytime a photo is shown it shows the male uh, subject in the image with no redaction, but there will be other females, both minors and adults, that will also have redactions in their face. So that's problematic, I think, because it adds more to that rumor mill where a certain public figure will be seen in a photo with black boxes on faces next to them, and that creates this idea because everyone's been told that redactions are there to protect victims that and creates that assumption in people's minds that that person might be a victim. But that's not necessarily the case and often isn't.
I see. And on the congressional side, the House Oversight Committee under Representative James Comer is pushing forward. They're planning to depose Ghislaine Maxwell on February 9th, and we're on the verge of contempt charges against Bill and Hillary Clinton until the couple agree to testify. So what do these developments suggest about Congress's role, and how did you track the back and forth negotiations that led to the Clintons' reversal?
Yeah, so I gotta, give a shout out to our congressional counterpart, Lauren Green, who's been doing a tremendous job tracking right now the what's going on in Congress with this what I would call more of a procedural standoff at this point, involving the House Oversight Committee's efforts to bring Bill and Hillary Clinton in to testify. It started off with the couple, not really wanting anything to do at all with this, and seemed like that they were just going to, uh, keep barking and not really submit to this effort because part of the original argument was that these are former officials, especially former President Clinton. He might maintain certain immunities there. That was a theory, but the counter argument is that he wasn't president at the time whenever these associations with Epstein were being had, so that argument wouldn't hold up to wait. So where we're at right now, in summary, is that the Clintons have agreed to sit down with the committee, similar to a separate issue involving former special counsel Jack Smith. He also was more complicit and wanted to testify, but he wanted that to happen publicly, as do the Clintons. But the Oversight Committee wants to do this first under a closed door testimony that will have cameras, and lawmakers in that closed door hearing will be able to ask more thorough questions than they would if they were having an open hearing, because open hearings have separate rules that require just a few minutes to ask questions. This would be able to sort of really cover the gamut of all the questions that the lawmakers want to ask the Clintons. The Clintons have, vehemently denied that they have any, substantial involvement with Epstein that would matter, but they have, agreed to do this because of that threat of criminal contempt. Um, but they also see this as a marker of creating precedent. I think that by doing this, they have a feeling that, and you're seeing this from the Clintons' attorney, that this could set precedent. And I think that the implication there is, you can have this, with us, this moment for us to testify, but if, for instance, Donald Trump, whose name also comes up very often in the Epstein files, again, not a sign of any sort of guilt or anything like that, but for instance, whenever Donald Trump is out of office, Donald Trump's interactions with Epstein didn't take place whenever he was president, so they could use the same standard potentially against former president like himself if this was still a political issue at the time. So I think that we're seeing. I think we are going to see this deposition take place. The other element here I want to point out too is that by doing this deposition and not doing it publicly, this gives the oversight committee sort of a jump on the public narrative that they have the ability to release this transcript whenever they want after it happens, and they can give it to reporters and you know tell them, here's a highlight, moment from the interview, and really try to set the narrative behind it. So there's that political element leaning on this as well.
I see. And looking ahead, what do you think James Comer and the Oversight Committee could release, perhaps through Maxwell's deposition or the Clintons' testimony, that might finally satisfy public demands for closure?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the overall, point of this is that, you go back to someone like Rokana. I think that and victims for that matter, because I think that his points of view often are keeping victims in mind, is that given all this information that we have, I think there's a level of dissatisfaction of like, well, why can't the DOJ bring in some of these people that are mentioned in the files for further questioning and sort of deepen their investigation here? Because if there is this plethora of evidence to show that Epstein was this well connected, then the conventional assumption that I think a lot of people are making is, well, there's got to be somebody who knows more information. So I think that targeting people like Maxwell, for example, I think is a much better uh, bet that you're going to get something out of her, someone who was more directly involved in Epstein's day-to-day life. From the Clintons, however, I think that you're probably going to be seeing them ask very tough, compound-like questions that are going to put them in a situation to answer very slowly, possibly vaguely, possibly a lot of reliance on statements like "I don't recall" or "I don't know." There's that element there where they can just sort of, say that, even though they are under oath, and you know, if they simply, say they don't recall, there would have to be, some kind of, information that the interviewer could, give them to sort of jog their memory. But, I would imagine that, if the Clintons are being forthright, as have multiple attorneys general who were called in to, offer their deposition as well. Many of them, swore. People like Eric Holder, people like Bill Barr, just sort of said what they knew, but nothing that they said they knew was really anything new.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
it's like you're going to really have to go, I think, deeper than Ghislaine Maxwell and the Clintons, and I think that you're not going to have to. You're going to want that the DOJ might actually bring some of these people rather than just Congress handling this, because I think that Congress, for the most part, will just wind up becoming more of a show um, that, or more of like an embarrassment or a humiliation ritual rather than actually getting somewhere where there could be potentially more cases that come up.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen partisan theater. Wouldn't it be a surprise? Absolutely. And will the remaining Epstein files ever see the light of day, given the DOJ's compliance with the Transparency Act, but ongoing redactions? I mean, you've dealt with government stonewalling before. How do you assess the likelihood, and what strategies have you used to pressure officials for more?
Yeah, the strategies that you have to use, I think, and I'll answer the first question in a moment, but the strategies that you have to use really is, um, locking locking the officials down on maybe perhaps inconsistencies in the information that they're giving. I mean, I think that the DOJ has a lot of general assumption, just because they're the law enforcers. They're the ones that are enforcing the law that the Congress just passed. So if they're not doing it perfectly in the eyes of another person or a lawmaker for that matter, I think that, you know, just based on the way that it's written, I mean, they gave us every single file that has Epstein's name mentioned in it. So their inability to divulge the rest of the files, even if most of the pages are black marked or things like that, is kind of dissatisfying, I think, to most people if you think about it hard enough. And the other element here is that if Comer's committee wants to hold somebody like the Clintons in contempt for not testifying, um, then Democrats might see this as an opportunity to sort of bookmark for the future after a new potential presidential administration uh, comes in. If hypothetically, if Gavin Newsom is the Democratic primary winner and he wins the general election and he has a new DOJ, there could be an effort to call in, in this hypothetical, former Attorney General Pam Bondi for questioning, or potentially even try to go after her if they feel like the law wasn't enforced that they were told to enforce. So I think that there's a extreme level of immunity that the DOJ faces right now. But for the future, looking down the line, years after this conversation, I mean, I think there could be, some just general liability there that, could come back to haunt. So I think that that's, part of the pressure here. And so I'm not going to, I don't think saying never is good, because there might be something that happens in the future that beckons the DOJ to release all the additional records. They seem very adamant that there's certain things that they can't show because it would definitively harm the victims, and that's why, already we're seeing the DOJ having this issue drawn into court. Um, so I mean, it goes back to the fact that this is again like almost an impossible task, and it's definitely showing signs that, and it has been showing signs for many months now, that Trump's promise to release these Epstein files has become more of a thorn, I think, than what most people really assumed would happen. And a lot of that is because of this Epstein Files Transparency Act being passed.
Very interesting. Well, Kaelan, thank you so much for shedding light on this complex story and sharing your reporting insights.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Anytime.
Well, thank you so much for watching Deep Dive. Please visit our website for more of these stories, and feel free to send us your questions or story ideas. We hope to see you back here next week.